Welcome to an edition of CCSD Living Environment. Today we're going to look at parts of a cell. We've already discussed the cell membrane. Now we need to take a look at the other pieces that make up the cells that we're familiar with. So to do that, we need to define a term called organelles. Organelles are the little parts of a cell that carry out the metabolic needs or life functions for the cell. And when we put L at the end of the word, we're saying little. So basically they're little organs. They're performing similar functions for the cell that your organs would perform for the whole body. But every single cell has those organelles, so every cell, in essence, could survive on its own because they're undergoing the life functions. The first one we're going to look at is the cytosol. The cytosol is the jelly-like liquid that fills space around the cell's other organelles. It is made up mostly of water. And to follow up right behind that, we have the cytoplasm, which is the material in the cell from the cell membrane to the nuclear membrane, including all of the organelles. So the cytosol is part of the cytoplasm. The cytosol is just that jelly-like liquid. The cytoplasm is everything. So if we go from the cell membrane to the nuclear membrane, everything that's inside of that cell makes up the cytoplasm. And it tells you that the cytoplasm contains dissolved minerals, gases, glucose, waste products, etc., etc. Whatever is found inside the cell is what you're going to have in your cytoplasm. So there is definitely a distinction between the cytosol and the cytoplasm. In eukaryotic cells, which are the ones that we're going to be concerned with at this point, primarily we're looking at differences between plant cells and animal cells. That's where we're going to focus for the purposes of these notes. So let's look at the nucleus, which we know eukaryotic cells have a nucleus. It's called the brain of the cell because it controls all the activity inside the cell. It is surrounded by a thin nuclear membrane. It contains chromosomes or hereditary material, which is the DNA. It's the center or near the center of the cell. Both plant and animal cells have those. Any eukaryotic cell has a nucleus. And located inside of the nucleus, we have a structure called the nucleolus. The nucleolus is inside the nucleus. That's where ribosomes are made. So the ribosomes that our cells have are actually found or started, they're made inside of the nucleolus. And another one that we've probably heard a lot about is the mitochondria. I'm sure you've heard of the mighty mitochondria. So you should know that it is a rod-shaped organelle that is used again by eukaryotic cells to release energy in the form of ATP by the process of cellular respiration. And remember, we've said before, respiration is a process where you make energy in the form of ATP. Well, that process is done inside of our mitochondria. And I drew a picture over here on the side. It kind of looks like a Mike and Ike or a jelly bean with a little squiggly line in it. If you see a picture with an arrow pointing to structure that looks like that, that's the mitochondria that they're asking you to define or label. So the mitochondria is the site of cellular respiration, which is where energy is made in the form of ATP. Again, eukaryotic cells have that. Plant and animal cells both have mitochondria. And that takes us to a structure called the endoplasmic reticulum. The endoplasmic reticulum is a system of tubes that runs throughout the cell, forming pathways for materials to be moved in the cell. It's kind of like a transport network within the cell. The endoplasmic reticulum comes in two forms. There's a smooth form, which again is just a group of tubes that have no ribosomes attached to them. Or there's a rough form, again, a group of tubes that has ribosomes attached to it. So it just depends. And how did they name them? They name them based on appearance. If you're a tube and you have these little things attached to you, you're going to appear or feel rough in texture. If you don't have those things attached to you, you're going to feel or appear smooth in texture. That's how they name the smooth and the rough. One thing that I'd like to point out when it comes to the endoplasmic reticulum is that oftentimes you'll see that abbreviated as ER. So this would be SER, this would be RER. And that would be a fine abbreviation to use in anything that you're writing as well. Finally, let's talk about those ribosomes. Ribosomes are where proteins are made or synthesized in the cell. Remember, synthesis means to make. They can be free in the cytoplasm, floating around on their own like all of the other organelles, or they can be attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, like we just said, to make rough endoplasmic reticulum. Ribosomes are the smallest organelle that there is, and they are found in prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. And notice that's the only one where we've said that it's found in both. Why would that be? Well, because every single cell has to make proteins. And ribosomes do it so efficiently. Granted, their ribosomes are a little bit different, but ribosomes do it so efficiently there's no reason to have another structure. So all cells, whether they're prokaryotic or eukaryotic, have ribosomes to synthesize or make their proteins. And that takes us to a structure called the Golgi complex. You could see it written as Golgi complex. You may see Golgi body. You may see Golgi apparatus. It was named after Camillus Golgi, who was the guy that originally discovered it. It's a package and release molecule. So think about it like a cell post office. If there's something that you want to send out of the cell, the Golgi is going to package it up and make it ready to ship it out. They tend to look like a stack of pancakes, so if you're looking at a picture of a cell, you'll see these stacks. Those stacks, generally speaking, are your Golgi body. A vacuole, most of you have heard of a vacuole before. A vacuole is an organelle that stores water and dissolved materials. Something you should know is that plants have a much larger one to store water, which we call the central vacuole. The central vacuole allows the plant to hold water inside of it. So in conditions where there's not a lot of water coming from outside, it's stored up kind of extra water within the plant cells. Beneficial to an organism that doesn't move around a lot. For us, we can move to get water. So we don't have a central vacuole. We're not quite as dependent on our cells having enough water as plants are. Not to say we're not dependent on water. That's not what I'm saying. And a lysosome. Lysosomes are kind of cool. Lysosomes contain digestive enzymes. Now, what does digestion mean? To break it down. So lysosomes contain digestive enzymes to break down large food molecules, waste products, and old cell parts. So if for some reason a cell needs to destroy itself, or it needs to go away, the lysosome will come in and it will actually destroy the cell. And the process of cell death is called apoptosis, which we'll come to later in the year, but the lysosomes are what are involved in that. And there are structures in the cell that allow this concept of breaking down, removing, or getting rid of other molecules to occur. Centrioles. Centrioles are pretty cool little things that only animal cells have, and they help in the process of cell division. So when our cells get ready to divide, which you've heard of before as mitosis, mitosis is just the division of the nucleus. And in the process of that whole process taking place where the cell is dividing, these structures called centrioles come in and help animal cells to divide. If you're a plant cell, you don't have centrioles. Okay, so what do plant cells have that I don't have as an animal? Plant cells have structures called chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are green disc-shaped structures that contain chlorophyll. That's the pigment that makes them green. And they are the site of photosynthesis. Remember, photosynthesis is the process where the plant takes in carbon dioxide and water and it produces glucose or sugar or food using sunlight. That's where the photo part comes from. So the chloroplast is a structure found in plants. Now, yes, algae we know are a eukaryotic cell, but they're not a plant. They fall under the category of protist. But remember we said we're doing a comparison for plant and animal cells. So yes, plant cells only in comparison to animal cells, but there are a few other organisms that do contain chloroplasts, or at least chlorophyll. The next one in our list is a cell wall. Again, plant cells only. It's a non-living rigid layer that surrounds the cell membrane. It gives the plant cell shape and support. The important thing here is that materials can freely pass through the cell wall. Remember, it's the cell membrane that controls that passage. And we said that the plant cells have a cell membrane just inside the cell wall. The cell wall is there to provide support for the plant cell. Plant cell walls are comprised of a substance called cellulose. Now, again, we're doing a comparison between animal cells and plant cells. There are bacteria that do have a cell wall comprised of something called peptidoglycan, which we spoke about earlier in the year. Fungus have a cell wall made of something called chitin. So there are other organisms that have a cell wall. However, in our comparison of plant and animal cells, plant cells are the only ones that have it. Animal cells do not. And that takes us down to a cytoskeleton. Again, remember, cyto means cell. So basically a cell skeleton. What does your skeleton do for you? Provides you structure and support so you're not a big oozing bag of blah. It gives you that rigid kind of upright nature. Well, in the case of a cell, the cytoskeleton provides all cells, plants included, with support from hollow and solid proteins that are found inside the cytoplasm of the cell. So the cytoskeleton gives a cell some support, some ability to kind of form a sphere, if you will, for an animal. And even though plants have that cell wall to help with structure, they do have a cytoskeleton to help kind of keep their cell membrane so it's filling up that whole area. Otherwise, where would we be without our skeletons? Cells would be in a similar position. And finally, probably one of the most interesting parts about cells is the fact that they can move. So if we look at the movement of cells, we have two options to help us do that. One would be cilia, which are short hair-like projections that work like oars on a boat. There's usually many of them attached to the cell. So I'm showing you a cell here that has cilia all the way around it, and they're very short. So if you think about this cell that has these cilia attached, like a paramecium, which we looked at earlier under the microscope, if you think about those cells, they have all of these cilia attached. So if they move them all the same direction, they're going to move in that direction. If they move them this way, they'd move backwards. If these guys move faster, they'll move this way. If these guys move faster, they'll move this way. So cilia help the cells move. It's like having oars on a boat. If you've seen old movies, we've got a bunch of people rowing a boat. If we move one side more than the other, we're going to turn in that direction. The cilia can do the same thing for cells. Many unicellular organisms have cilia. We have some cells in our body that actually have cilia. And finally, the last one we're going to look at is the flagella. The flagella is a tail-like extension that can spin like a propeller, or it can use a whip-like motion to propel the cell through some kind of fluid. And the most common example we have of that is a sperm cell. We know that for any organism that has a sperm, there's a flagella on the end of it, the tail. Well, it's actually not a tail. It's not a separate part. It's an organelle that's part of the cell, but it allows that cell to move. Plant sperm, by the way, do not have a flagella. Animal sperm do. Another interesting difference between plant cells and animal cells, or just between plants and animals in general. So you have two options for that flagella. It can spin in a circle that will allow the cell to move. Many of you under the microscope saw euglena. Euglena have a flagella that spins that way. And then the other option is that whip-like motion that will allow it to move and swim forward in the water. What I'd like you to do is look at the bottom of your note packet, and you can see that there's two pictures. There's a picture of a plant cell and a picture of an animal cell. The animal cell, notice, is more circular in nature. The plant cell, notice, is more rectangular in nature. And also take a look at that very, very large central vacuole inside of the plant cell. Notice they both have mitochondria, that both have to undergo respiration to make energy, and only the plant cell has the cell wall and the chloroplast. That takes us through parts of the cell, and I know for many of you it's just review, but this gives us a definition so we have some information that we can go to. That's all for today. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you soon.